Good afternoon, people. I'm here as your treasurer to provide a report on the financial condition of the diocese and the proposed budget for 2021. To do that, I would like to have the spreadsheet containing the budget shown on the screen. Here we are. Okay, as you can see by looking at this particular spreadsheet, it has three major components. It shows financial data for 2019, for 2020, and the proposed budget for 2021. In a number of cases, it shows the percent of the budget that was expended in a given year, or it shows the difference between budget amounts in one year and the next. But we can go through this quickly since we're on a tight time schedule here with our virtual synod. In 2019, if you look at the revenue line 8, you see that the total revenue, actual revenue was 919,539. And then on row, I think it's 61 or 63 down at the bottom. Let's see, we see total operating expenses on line 63 is 941,435. So expenses were greater than revenue, and the deficit in 2019 was 21,896. But that was actually less than the planned deficit we had in the budget for that year. But nevertheless, we still had that deficit, and that was financed out of our reserves in 2019. Then in 2020, we started off the year just fine, and then the budget was approved back in October of 2019, and then by the time the year started, the COVID-19 pandemic had hit us and was in full sway. And so a lot of things changed over the years because of the pandemic. One thing that didn't change was, at least through September of 2020, or 3/4 of the year, is that giving by the churches held up substantially. So our total operating income through September was 81% of the budgeted amount. On a straight line, even month-to-month basis, it would have only been 75%. So the income is so far in 2020 well ahead. On the other hand, expenses, if we go down to the total expense line again, in 2020, that's rows 63, I think it was. Total expenses, though, are only $598,759, or only 65% of the budgeted amount. The result of that then on line 64 is a large surplus of $183,653. However, at the end of the year, that surplus probably won't be as large, because a number of categories, most prominently the expenditures for church planning and church planning assistance, will likely come up to a much greater extent of the budget than they are in September. Their expenditures always seem to be weighted toward the end of the year as they decide what to do with the funds they have budgeted to benefit the various church plants and prior plants that need special assistance. So moving on then to the budget numbers for 2021, we're not changing much. As you can see in line 2, we're assuming that we'll have the same giving budgeted in 2021 as we had budgeted in 2020, even though at least through September we were ahead of that to a small extent. And then we have the same income from the province, as we always have each year, that compensates the diocese for the time that Bishop John spends on provincial matters as the Dean of Provincial Affairs. And then we have it budgeted for next year on row 7, $5,130 for what is called administrative fee income. Late in 2020, we started providing or making available to church plants bookkeeping and insurance benefits for which we charge them a fee, a modest fee, where we think those modest fees will sum to $5,100 or so in 2021, which is a source of income the diocese has not had before. But that gives us a total then of $970,716 as the budgeted income. The first big deduction from that is that we provide 10% of the diocese income to the province as our contribution to provincial operations. And so that's the first big deduction there. Then as we move down, the church planning budget looks a lot larger than it was in 2020, 150,000 versus a little over 94,000. But that's a little bit misleading, because in 2020, we originally budgeted 146,000 for church planning. But a decision was made, recommended first by the Great Commission Committee and then agreed to by the Standing Committee and the Bishop, to have the canon for church planning a full-time position in 2021 and going forward, while it was only a part-time position in earlier years. To help finance that in the first year, last year or this year, 2020, the Great Commission Committee transferred $52,000 of its $146,000 initial budget to cash reserves that can be used to help compensate in the first year the full-time canon for church planning. And so when they did that, it lowered their budget from 146,000 to 94,000 for 2020. However, starting in 2021, it's only reasonable that the budget include the full-time compensation of the canon for church planning without reducing the Great Commission Committee's budget for all the things the canon and others do regarding church planning. And then if you look down to the bottom of the line, row 63, I think it is again, or line 63, you see the total expenses come to $1,022,717, which superficially appears to have a $52,000 deficit then over our $970,000 budgeted income. But that's because the $52,000 that the Great Commission Committee in 2020 transferred to cash reserves has not been added back in. So you see there on line 65, we add that 52,000 back to, which reduces the 1,022 to 970,000, and there, I mean, 1,022 to 970,000, and the budget then balances. So that means that the budget for next year is in place. It's been prepared by the staff and the finance committee, and then approved by the standing committee of the diocese. And now the final approval will require a vote of the delegates at this synod. However, one other thing I want to talk about before we get to that is that what we're asking for contributions to the diocese from all the churches in the diocese. Historically, we have asked 4.1% of their operating income to be provided to the diocese, which is a far cry from the 10% that we give to the province, but it's all we need. We do our budget by saying, what do we need to do the things we think the diocese should be doing? Not necessarily saying, oh, well, we have 10% of the operating income of all our churches. What are we going to do with it? We start the other way around. What is it that we need to be doing, and what would it cost? And then what percent then do we need from the churches to achieve that? And it's always been 4.1%. We have felt that it might have to go up, as like in 2019 when we were actually budgeting a deficit at 4.1%. But then in 2020, we're probably going to end the year with a surplus. Plus, we have the 52,000 that the Great Commission Committee switched from 2020 to 2021 to help compensate the full-time canon for church planning. While we have not yet hired that canon to replace Canon Tom Herrick, who's going to be retiring, we hope to do so early in the year and need that full-time compensation. The only other thing I could say about our financial condition is what our reserves are. We have cash reserves, that is, cash that's not designated for any particular use. We have cash reserves of almost $300,000, which is more than 3 months operating expenses. So we have a good reserve position for any catastrophe that might happen. But as we've seen, we've held up well during the pandemic through September. However, it's possible that we could still feel the effects on income of the pandemic in the last quarter of the year. Just as we have earlier felt it on our expenses and resulted in less expenses than we had budgeted. So thanks for hearing me out through this tedious report. I'm available, or I will remain online to answer any questions you may have.